Good afternoon. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have in the studio today Pete Stauber. Pete, welcome.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming in today. Pete has been very involved in our community. He has quite a list of achievements, and now he has decided that he's running for senator in the 8th Congressional District. Pete, I'd like you to tell the viewers just a little bit about you and your family, and then why are you running for the Senate seat?
Sure. Actually, it's a U.S. House, a congressional seat, 8th Congressional District.
Thank you for correcting me.
There you go.
Yeah, okay.
So my name is Pete Stauber, and I'm running to seek the Republican endorsement for the congressional seat, 8th District here in the state of Minnesota. And I'm married and have 4 children, and have lived in the district almost my entire life, with the exception of college and where my professional hockey took me, which was out of state.
And you are currently on the Duluth Police Force and also representing St. Louis County. Sure. As a commissioner.
Yeah, I'm a 5th District County Commissioner in St. Louis County. I'm into my 2nd term now, 9 months into my 2nd term. And I'm actually recently retired from the police department. My last day was August 4th, and I'm retired and running for this congressional seat.
Well, we're missing a good policeman in the city, and yet maybe we will see you in a higher position where I'm sure you'll do a good job there.
Well, I tell you what, my police career in Duluth was in my view, exceptional. To be able to serve the citizens of Duluth for 22 years as a professional police officer for 23. It was an exceptional career. The Duluth Police Department and the Duluth Fire Department, our local EMS, are second to none. And it was just a real privilege to be able to serve with them and alongside them.
What do you think about this the situation in Duluth with drugs and things? Do you think that that's something that we can overcome with some of the, I've interviewed somebody else that has mentioned some of the things they'd like to see happen if they were elected to the city council. Do you think that there's some hope in curtailing some of the heroin use and other types of drugs that seem to be coming into the city of Duluth?
I believe there is hope. There has to be hope. You know, for people under 51 and under, the leading cause of death right now is drug overdoses.
Oh my goodness!
And so we're seeing it all over the country. And I can share this with you that in Duluth, if you'd have told me when I first started my career that as police officers we would be carrying Narcan, which reverses the effect of an overdose, I would have said there's no way we would carry that. And so our police officers and firefighters and our EMS are using it on a weekly basis within our city and within our county and within our state, because many law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMS providers are carrying Narcan to reverse the effects of heroin or opioid overdoses, drug overdoses. And I think that we can do it with prevention. We have to invest in prevention and invest in the people through education. Right now you have drugs such as fentanyl that is hugely dangerous, and a certain amount ingested can kill you. And so we're seeing people dying very early in life because of the drug overdoses. And so to answer your question, yes, in fact, we have to change the culture and the attitudes of drugs. There are some people that would say, for instance, marijuana is okay to use. I don't subscribe to that theory at all. I have seen people start with marijuana and go on to harder, more dangerous. They're all dangerous drugs, but the drugs that will can kill you, and I've seen it, and it's just a tragedy. How do we tell a parent that your child was found in a bathroom, for instance, at a hotel or a restaurant or a convenience store, that we found them passed away and we believe it was a drug overdose? It's one of the worst notifications that any police officer or law enforcement officer can give, and I have given those. And it's a tragedy, terrible waste of a life. They're our, you know, our future is our young people, and it's killing them. And so there is a way to do it, and I think through education, prevention, and make sure that those people who are addicted, that we invest in their treatment so they can become good, productive citizens. It is an actual disease. You get hooked on these drugs, and you'll do anything for them. You'll cause crimes, you'll steal from your family, you'll commit robbery, and it's just cyclical, which costs everybody money, from the police to EMS to hospitals to the courts to public defenders. I mean, we're all in it together. And the bottom line is, no matter how many times we arrest these people, we can't arrest ourselves out of the situation. It has to be preventive, and really that person has to understand that they are an addict, and it has to come from within. There's a lot of resources, but we have to provide the resources, let the addict or the families understand why we're doing what we're doing. And you'll notice that Public Health and Human Services in the city or St. Louis County, Commissioner Patrick Boyle is the chair of that. He's the perfect position. He's in the perfect position, being in the medical field himself, and he understands it, and he's been able to share that. I've been able to share my street experience with him, and we're getting there. The Opioid Abuse Reduction Strategies Group, the ORS group in our community, is exceptional. And so that's a long answer to the question. Yes, it can be, the crisis of drug overdose and deaths can be stopped and reversed. It's going to take an entire community's effort on prevention side and education side. We have to let our kids know. I mean, starting in 7th or 8th grade, drugs are not the way to live a productive, healthy life. Never have been, never will be.
Well, I think that you've given me some hope by just your explanation here. Something that I see happening, having monitored the school district for, like I say, 8 1/4 years, is that when we educate with good teachers and good programs, we give kids a reason for living. Some kids come from homes where it's pretty bad, and we have a lot of homeless people here. They don't have a lot of hope. If they can go to that classroom and get an education that's going to give them a future, that gives them hope. I believe that's some of the problem with the drug scene that we're into today. I really do, from what I've seen. And I know that the Teen Challenge, which it's adult and teen challenge now, I've contributed to that program for many, many years. And I've seen that program grow, has homes now for women as well as for men. That program has a very high percentage rate of return to the community. But of course they base their program on the Word of God, which that's the most hope that everybody has. And I own a storage facility where a young man who's come from a very good home, father is in ministry here, family's been in ministry for many years, he got involved with marijuana. He was married, and his wife too, both of them on drugs, just destroying their life. And he has struggled mightily to get off of the drugs. And I saw him the other day, and he's clean now. He has been for several months. His wife has been clean for about 2 years. But it is a struggle. It is definitely a struggle. But it started with the harmless marijuana, which I know better is not. I listened to a young man through the township when I was official there talk about how marijuana was the drug that pulled him into doing many other things and finally getting his life clean. But he had to have hope. He had to have the support of family. His family, this one, both of them, the families never deserted him. They stood right beside these two young men, and that's what gave them the courage to go on with their struggle.
Let's go back to your original comment about school. And I think that I went to Piedmont Elementary School in Piedmont Heights, And we talk about that teacher that you remember or make a difference. My teacher was Miss Shoemate at the time. She is now Miss Beth Olson. She was one of my favorite teachers. She connected with me at a young elementary age, and that was a teacher that like I've always respected. You know, she taught well. She respected everybody. It was just as a young school kid that Miss Shoemate was my favorite teacher. And I tell her today, to this day when I see her and her husband, that she made a difference in my life. But now, if we can take it out of the school and bring it back home, my parents and my family also made a much bigger difference, because the discussions at the kitchen table and what we learned from our mom and dad and our siblings are kind of what we grow up with and leave the house with. And I'm very thankful my parents, they had tough love on me at times, and I appreciated that. In our household, if you lived under my mom and dad's roof, you were home by 5 minutes to 10. Because what came on at 10? The news, right? 5 minutes to 10, they wanted to make sure their 6 boys were in the house, and before they could watch the news and retire for the evening. And so we look at the conversations, the values, the ethics that you receive are really primarily from the family. And what we're seeing today is a lot of single mothers, and there's not that other parent involved and to give the guidance, and it's hard. It's very hard to be a single parent. If I could just add, I was a single parent when my wife was deployed to Iraq, and it was only for 5.5 months. That was hard. And I needed help from our church and family to help me through those times. So that was 5.5 months. So you look at what are people doing for a lifetime, and it is really, it was difficult for me as a police officer to see some of the situations that some of our young folks were in, because we'd go into the house and it wasn't well kept, no food in the refrigerator or very little, and it was difficult because you kind of knew that there might not be an opportunity. Not saying that you can't have the opportunities if you come from difficult situations, because really through good judgment, good reasoning, good parenting, and a little bit of luck, you can really do a lot of good things in your life. And so it's up to us, I think, to encourage the youth, encourage our teachers to continue teaching in a way that really encourages study habits, encourages the educational component, as we know that the kids that drop out of school have a high rate of poverty, and it's just cyclical. So education is a key. Good education is a key, and really that family, as Ronald Reagan said, that kitchen table talk that we can share with our spouses, our parents, our siblings is critically important.
Well, education, whether it be educating the public about the drug issue and how we can abate some of this, or children going to school and getting a foundation that they will be able to use for the rest of their life. Nutrition, education, it doesn't matter what education it is, it's all extremely important for people to further themselves and become a better citizen all around.
And also there's a realm of this that we haven't talked about yet, but that's personal responsibility too.
Right.
To have personal responsibility, and to make sure that when you go to school that you're listening, you're behaving, you're in the classroom, you're listening to your instructor, and that's what schooling is, right? To behave, to take the knowledge that the teacher is trying to give to you, bring it to yourself and learn. The personal responsibility is a big part, I think, of what we're missing in some segments of our society. It's like the blame game. Mm-hmm. I can act like this because of this or what have you. Having personal responsibility, it just it takes somebody to look inside themselves and say, we know what's right and wrong. We know that we shouldn't do certain things, and that most people are really good people, and we don't have to commit crimes to get ahead in life. There's positive legal ways to do real good things in your life, but I think we've gotten away from really a personal responsibility at times and blamed. events or whatever. And sometimes it's legit. Sometimes, absolutely, sometimes it's legit, but from the police officer perspective, I saw a lot of blaming or shifting the personal responsibility to a situation that I've seen over and over where people have overcome it and done great things. And we want to be able to give not only our young kids, but all of us hope when who hasn't had a down moment in their life, right? It's about overcoming that, getting some support from your close people of faith or what have you.
Somebody
Yeah.
important in your life to give you that support.
Right.
Whether it be a teacher, a neighbor, or someone, if the children do go to church. They all need support, and they all need guidance when they're young. I mean, that's what the adults are supposed to be doing for young people.
That's right.
I have a hard time understanding in a conversation I had with somebody just a week ago that I always feel I need to respond if somebody sends me a text or leaves me a phone call with a message on it. I feel I need to respond, and yet this person said, I don't have to respond if I don't want to. And I said, okay, so if you ask me a question, I don't have to respond. Is that what you're telling me? He had to think a minute.
Yeah.
He had to be responsible to me for a minute and think about that one, because he had just gone around, well, if he gets a text and he doesn't feel like answering, he doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay, then do I have to respond to you? If you want some information from me, should I have to respond to you? See, I didn't grow up in that era. That's totally foreign to my way of thinking.
Well, look at the technology we have from even 10 years ago. I mean, we have cell phones and you have Skype and you name it. I mean, it's beyond it's beyond
my understanding.
Yeah, the comprehension. There you go. But it's the technology. It can be used in a good way, though. So one of the things that I think that the technology has maybe brought us back a little bit is that communication. We have the technology to do a lot of things, but it's that one-on-one communication, like you and I are having now, that some of our kids aren't getting because they're texting. And so I've always said, as a retired police officer now, but in the training unit, one of the first things we look at, one of the biggest qualities we look at in a police officer candidate is, can they communicate? Can they look you in the eye, talk, have that discussion, and be comfortable with it, and being able to see both sides of the story and then make a decision. And communication is a key part. And I've often said that when we can communicate with each other, even if we have differences of opinion, when we can communicate with respect, whatever the outcome, it's going to be much better. You know, it's going to have points or parts to it that maybe I won't agree, but you're very happy with. And so, as we go forward, the communication part, Marcia, is going to be very different even in the next few years. I mean, even in our campaigns, in my campaign, it's a couple of cell phones and computers, but that's part of it. That's where we're going. That's where our technology is leading and bringing our lives and our nation.
There's no way we can stop that train that we're on right now.
No.
Communication train. It is advancing faster than most of us. Well, certainly I'll speak for myself. I can keep up with it. It's very, very changing all the time. And I always have to go to somebody and say, I have no clue what this is all about. Do you want to explain this to me, please?
Well, do you remember we used to have the paper, our daily chores or what have you, the monthly, what we have to do on Monday or Tuesday, the calendars, right? It used to be on paper. No, we just take our cell phone out, we delete one event and add another one in there. And in my case, my wife knows exactly where I'm at. My kids know exactly what I'm doing. I know what they're doing. I know what function they're at, just on the family calendar. Before, you'd have to go home and somebody would write a note and say, I left for volleyball. Well, now you know. They were at a hockey game or basketball. You know, so the technology it's there. It can be used to greatly benefit our lives, and it has. But there's some downside to that. That human element is not necessarily there all the time.
I do have to agree with you. Well, you know, we've talked a little bit casually here. Let's get into your run for the congressional seat. Why did you choose? I mean, we really need you here in St. Louis County.
I appreciate that comment.
I know, I've worked with you and I appreciate what you've done. So why step up to Washington, taking your family away from this beautiful area and going out there? I mean, I know a bit about what's going on in Washington. I've been there a couple of times. I've been involved in elected positions for 14, 15 years now, and so I'm very well aware of what's happening at that end of the country.
So when I'm elected, my family's not moving out there with me. My family's going to stay in the district. And so will I. You have an apartment out there. You go out there on Mondays and come back Thursdays. I will not leave the 8th district. This is my home. But to answer your question, why am I running? I really feel that the current occupant, Congressman Nolan, doesn't speak for many of us anymore. I believe that he's out of touch in many areas, and so I'm one that when I think that I can make things better, I jump in it, no matter what it is. And in this case, it's the congressional race, and I do have Congressman Nolan. He and I spoke it. This isn't going to be about personal attacks. It's going to be about the issues, and he and I both know that we have stark differences. The contrast will be you'll see the contrast between how he thinks we should govern and how I think I should govern. I want more personal freedom, personal economic freedom, and the tentacles of the government in every part of our lives to back off. I think that and give more local control, more local and state control, where Washington. I don't believe they should be in every part of their life, and it's just it's Washington creep in every part of our life, and so I'm for personal freedom and responsibility. I think that we have a really good opportunity. I think I have a good opportunity to pick up this seat and represent the 8th district voters. I've lived here all my life. I was born in the 8th district. I have family here. I recreate here. Have a hunting shack here. I have a family cabin here. I have a small business here. I serve the public here. I was married here, grew up here, so I do love the 8th district. There's a passion to serve, to be able to bring what I think the values of the 8th district voters need and would support in Washington.
Well, I have to agree with you that the government is trying to infringe in every little aspect of our lives. I'm a constitutionalist. I believe the Constitution was developed by intelligent men who certainly couldn't see all that is happening now, but they believed in personal freedom as well. They believed in lesser government. However, it has morphed into something that I'm sure that they would be absolutely dumbfounded by where we're at today, the trillions of dollars worth of indebtedness. I mean, it's so mind-boggling to go out there and try and straighten out some of that. What do you propose would be some ways to start? I mean, you can't look at that whole thing and say, well, I'm going to fix it all. You're going to have to start someplace.
Yeah.
What would you say is the best place to start?
Well, I think maybe not the best place, but one of the places to start is what Congress is going to be taking up next month in September, our taxes. I believe that we should be able to keep more of the money that we earn because we can spend it better than the government can. With that being said, Marcia, you know that government is a necessity to build our infrastructure, to keep our nation secure, the public health and human services. That's an important part of the function of government. But you can't have government. You can't have government in every aspect of our life. And I think that what's happening is the tentacles are growing. And so you look at tax reform. You look at the support for mining and manufacturing that have been the backbone of our 8th Congressional District. You know, right now in the waning days, and when I say waning days, 8 days left of the Obama administration, they put the mineral exploration ban on, not mining, but mineral exploration ban in probably what's going to be the biggest precious metals find in the world. And they also took 235,000 acres of superior national forests out of that mineral exploration. That was done by an unelected Washington bureaucrat, and that's uncalled for. And I can say that had I been the sitting congressman at that time, I would have never allowed that type of assault to happen to the good men and women on the Iron Range who want to stay there and make a good wage and raise their families there. And so that's one of the parts of Washington. It just creeps in like that, and it should never have happened.
So Congressman Nolan could have stepped in and done something about this?
Well, so the answer is yes. It was his Democratic administration. It was a president that he supported. It was a Secretary of Interior that was appointed by a Democratic president. He certainly could have, or he could have stopped it, or at least got us all together and told the Secretary of the Interior and the Obama administration, no, don't assault our way of life. Precious metals, we can do it right. We will do it right. We'll not only mine precious metals, but we'll protect our environment at the same time. And we can do both. I've always advocated for that, to let the science dictate and the facts dictate, not innuendos or rumors.
Well, and I was at that hearing, the forestry held down at the deck. As you very well know, I think you were right in front of me or not too far in front of me, whatever. We both spoke. This was not an official position. The person that did the actual handiwork, if you want to call it that, she had no right to do what she did. Mm-hmm. But there was some politics going on there, which I won't get into. I was called by somebody outstate to go and be a spokesperson, mm-hmm. and I was more than willing to do it, mm-hmm. because I believe that we were being railroaded by the former administration. And he didn't do it just here in the state of Minnesota, he did it in other states as well. So right. Obama's responsible for this whole fiasco. I mean, how many studies, how many impact statements, how many investigations do we need, and how many billions and millions of dollars has to be spent to prove that this is absolutely crucial? I mean, how many people out there are going to be willing to give up their cell phones and other technology that's based on these precious metals? Yeah. And it's not just up on that Iron Range. A fellow that I spoke to right after I was done talking, he came up to me and he says, "You're the reason I came up here." And I went, "Oh, okay." So we got to talking. He showed me a map of those minerals. They go under Lake Superior all the way over to upper Michigan. They go all the way down the state of Minnesota. That is not just a small little portion where those precious ores are. And by stopping it up on the range, they're preventing other areas from being used. But it's under Lake Superior, mm-hmm. a big, huge body of water. Mm-hmm. How has it affected Lake Superior over the years and some of these other bodies of water? So little is really truly known about that entire issue, but you got a handful of people that are screaming that they don't want their boundary waters touched and that we're going to pollute all the waters and all that. But all of the facts need to be revealed about what's really going on out there. You know,
I have spoken at all the public hearings in support of polymet and the twin metals and reversing the mineral ban exploration. I've been up on the range and down in Duluth at the rallies because I believe in it. I believe that we need to bring these good jobs back, and I think that when you look at the whole scope of it, we talk about cell phones. There's also national security concerns too.
Sure.
Because on our global positioning satellites, there's certain minerals and rare earth metals that are a part of that. And so if we don't have those, we could be held hostage by a nation that isn't as friendly to the United States as we'd like it. So, and we have the best environmental standards in the world. Let's show the world that we can mine these precious metals safely, keeping our water clean. We can do both. There's nobody that wants to destroy our environment. Nobody wants to destroy our environment, and we can do both, and I'm an advocate of that. And I will say that I have always been an advocate of that. I'm not so sure my opponent has been an advocate of that the entire time.
Well, and you know, history does not have to repeat itself. let's face it, our forefathers, when they did lumbering and mining and whatnot, they had no knowledge of some of the stuff that we have today. And so they made some mistakes, and they kind of raped the earth by taking too much timber out. And yet we don't do those things anymore. We have come a long way with knowledge and understanding of our environment, and I believe there's, like you say, nobody wants to deliberately destroy it, and so we need to move with caution and knowledge, proper knowledge, and just be wise. We are told to be good stewards of the earth, and I think we're better stewards today than we were perhaps years back. So.
Well, we should. We need to make sure that our environment is pristine for generations to come. But earlier in the conversation, we talked about technology. Let's use the technology to benefit us all, and we can have a thriving economy. And we talk about technology. I'm on the Joint Airport Zoning Board in Duluth, and we talked about the A, B, and C zones, which are the landing zone, not the landing zones, but the approach zones. They're cone-shaped from the runway, and you look at those. Those were from the late 70s, early 80s. Now we have a aircraft manufacturer in Duluth, Cirrus Aircraft, that the avionics in those planes and jets can get you 200 feet above ground level, right above the runway in fog, to bring you to that, it's that precise. So you look at the technology now, do we have to reduce the ABC zones? I mean, that's what we're talking about now, because there's industrial development that can go around airports and what have you. And general aviation in and of itself is a growing part of the economy. You'll notice that the last 10 years in Duluth, in our region, it's grown, I think, 39%. That's fantastic. General aviation, we make planes, you have young pilots and float planes, and it's business for us. It's part of the economic engine. And so there's just an example where technology has really helped us.
Well, we lived in San Diego briefly when John was in the Navy. And we tried to stay out of the drop zone from the airplanes. But if anybody knows San Diego, that airport's out in the water. And so where do you suppose those airplanes dropped? Was the hills, which Seattle is San Diego is full of hills. So, down over. When we were out there a few years ago, that has totally changed. Yeah. So you can see how advancements have been made. And so hundreds of thousands of people's lives are no longer in the drop zone. And of course, we've got an airport that there's never been major development around it for housing and whatnot, like it was out there in San Diego. So I've seen a lot of changes and a lot of advancement, and certainly we are going to continue to do that, but without the minerals for the technology that is absolutely crucial for safety and for our own pleasure and what have you, we are then dependent on a nation. I don't know where some of that stuff is coming from right now. I haven't looked into that, but if we can't get it here in the United States, if somebody decides to cut us off, then what? Yeah. Then what will we do? We will be at the mercy of whatever nation that is.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation to be able to mine it here safely, keeping the environment, and bringing those good-paying jobs and families coming back to Minnesota and the Iron Range to live. The 8th Congressional District is a beautiful part of this country, beautiful, and that's why my family and I live here. My wife and I are raising 4 children here, and spectacular part of the nation.
Well, and many people from the Twin Cities come up here to enjoy this beautiful area, no doubt.
Yes.
But jobs, let's go back to jobs. I have seen, since I was a kid, my father worked at the steel plant, and we used to have to drive sometimes all the way from Piedmont Heights to the steel plant. Showed my grandkids the other day after we got off of the Lake Superior, Mississippi Railroad. I showed them where their great-grandfather used to work, which is all closed now. And so back and forth from Piedmont, there used to be the Clyde Iron and a rug-making factory and a coolerator, all kinds of industry on
Diamond
the
tool.
western diamond tool, all that stuff on the western side of the city. There's virtually nothing in the way of those types of jobs, which now everybody's not going to go to college. So where do these young people go to get jobs that are skills? They get training someplace else, and they go someplace else because they cannot get good jobs that are manual labor, so to speak, here. And of course, with the Iron Range being shut down, that's limited. So yeah, I believe we need to bring back jobs here that other people can do that don't have the desire nor the ability to go on to college and get a degree in something that they may not ever enjoy, but they need to work with their hands. Some people, that's the way they're geared.
You know, everybody's given different talents in life, and some people will excel at a four-year degree, for instance, an engineering degree or whatever, and some people are going to excel at working with their hands, the building and construction trades. Good paying jobs, but we want them to be permanent jobs. When we get the mines going, there's continuous improvements that are needed to be made. There's maintenance. We have a great workforce. We just have to allow them to work. And so that's why I'm a really big proponent of vocational or secondary industrial education. I had an uncle, Tony Stauber, who was with the school district for many years. He always was an advocate for vocational education because he said everybody's given different talents in life. Some people have the ingenuity within themselves to put things mechanically together and make stuff, and other people want to build stuff with their hands. And whether it's carpentry, HVAC systems, electrical, plumbing, concrete work, whatever, painters, whatever that is in the building and construction trades, that's good. Those are good salaries, good paying jobs around here, and I think that we don't have to choose one or the other. But I'll ask you this, what do you think our biggest exporter in the 8th Congressional District is? What's our biggest exporter? I'll save you. It's our kids.
I wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, the biggest exporter is our young kids graduating and moving somewhere else or down to the cities. I want our children, if they choose to stay up here in northern Minnesota, this is God's country. You know, if you love to hunt and fish, you drive 10 minutes from the city of Duluth. Not even that, you can be in a beautiful walleye lake. We have the greatest freshwater lake in the world right in our backyard. And so our goal should be to give our children an opportunity to stay right here in the 8th Congressional District. I don't want to have our children, unless it's their choosing, to have to leave and find a job elsewhere. We have to support the industry, light industry, throughout the community, and give them an opportunity, if they choose, to raise their families right here in the 8th District.
I agree. And my husband, one example, he went to UMD for a few months. He spent more time at the hamburger joint than he did studying because he really wasn't cut out to go to college. He ended up working for his father, who had a tank farm. They built the steel tanks that you used to see in the backyard with the oil in them, the big green. Yeah. And then after that closed, well, he went into carpentry, and eventually, you know, the boys, we have two sons and a daughter, the boys learned carpentry. Both of them have been into home maintenance and fixing. My son lives in Coon Rapids, where he's working for some of very prestigious people down there because he's an excellent worker. He does a good job, and so he gets word-of-mouth jobs all the time. Eric also is into carpentry with another firm. Now that we own a storage facility, without all that experience that my husband had, would not be able to maintain the storage facility. And so absolutely do I support those types of skills, and unfortunately our educational system seems to have felt that many of those skills are no longer necessary to teach. We had industrial ed when I went to school. Maybe you had it when you went to school as well. And those programs are not available for the students, be they girls or guys. And so unfortunately, there again, education is doing a disservice by not preparing, not giving these kids an opportunity to be prepared in some of those skills as they grow older.
And maybe at the high school level, when if they're geared toward becoming a mechanic and they love the engines and overhauling them and what have you, or sheet metal like we had, welding, carpentry, those are all good lifelong skills that you should have, and give yourself an opportunity to work in the trades. I say this, and this isn't a cliche at all. The men and women who work in Minnesota, I'll put them up against anybody in this country. We're workers, and we don't necessarily want anything for free. We'll work for it, and I think that the more we can talk to people about those trades jobs, because they're really good jobs. You know, it was several years ago I was listening to a local radio show. It was on our local station actually, but it was out of Minneapolis, and they were talking about technology and getting into the computer business, and that's where everybody should go into the computer business and what have you, and that's fine. But they had a sheetrocker that called in and said, "I am so happy that you're promoting the computer and its technology advances and stuff." He says, "Because I'm a sheetrocker down in the cities, I work 4 days a week and I get paid very, very well." You could read between the lines that he put his price out there. There wasn't a lot of people that had that skill set to be able to do it, and so and I think the building and construction trades is coming back. I think people recognize it. It's like you and I talking, and we'll talk to 2 or 3 people about it, and it's out there. It's a very, very honorable and noble profession.
I was very surprised when John told me he learned welding in school.
Yeah.
I don't know what was in the industrial ed department when I was going to school. Girls didn't get interested in that. You know?
Yeah, but listen, at Lincoln, Marcia, I had home ec, and
you're a few years younger than I am.
Yeah. But I had home ec with Mrs. Peterson, who was a neighbor of mine, and that was. Having 6 boys in the family, we did the cooking. My mom and dad showed us, but what have you. But having home ec, there was just as many boys in that class as there was girls. And I remember I cooked Swedish meatballs. That was when my test was cooking Swedish meatballs for the class. And I remember doing that. That was good stuff. That was learning lifelong skills. Skills.
They did not allow boys in home economics when I was a girl. Okay, so there's a few.
We advanced then.
Yeah, you definitely, but there's a couple years difference there, so
yeah.
I don't know when that came in, but I'm glad to hear that. And I know that they have life skills today, but when you talk to these students, they don't really have very much of it, and so I really would like to see it come back. But that's another issue.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, okay, you talk about the government stepping back and giving us a little more say in things. What are some crucial issues that you feel that you'd like the viewers to hear about in the last few minutes here?
So, a couple of things. You know, we talked about our Constitution, and one of freedom of speech is critically important to us. I believe that there's always opposing views, and I believe that somebody that doesn't have the same view as you should still have the opportunity to share it and talk about it. I'm very disgusted by the violence, the hatred, the bigotry that's happening across the country with opposing views, and in our country that should never be tolerated, never. So freedom of speech. Freedom of religion. All religion should be tolerated, and you know that's what our country's built on. And I'm also a Second Amendment supporter, having been a victim of a violent crime. In December of 1995, I was shot in the head by an individual with an extensive criminal history, and I know that it wasn't the gun that did that; it was the individual. And then later on, while on duty, an individual pulled the trigger of a weapon that was pointed at me. It was a handgun. It failed to discharge. So I had another guardian angel, right? And so
God was watching over you.
Yes, without question, throughout my whole career. my police career. And I look at it and I still support the Second Amendment right. That's a life-saving tool that we carry on our sides, never ever wanting to have used. I never ever wanted to use it, but I was ready to defend my life or somebody else's. And we know that obviously the use of force, when a police officer uses force, in deadly force that is, like 65% of police officers don't return to their job. It's that devastating for them.
Oh my goodness.
And so, and I'm also a pro-life candidate. I believe in life from conception to natural death. And I believe that we should always invest in life. We should always invest in people that maybe are down on their luck. And that's just who I am and what I believe, that life is so precious and it can be taken from us at any second. And so those of us who have kids or are married like I am, I want to make sure that every day that I tell my wife that I love her along with my 4 kids, they're very special, and I'm a blessed person.
You have a special needs child, do you not?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I want to ask you, going along on the abortion issue, simply because I've been pro-life since I found out about it. My son was born in 1973, which is where that big Roe v. Wade deal came down.
Yeah.
So if they had done amniocentesis or any of the other investigations when your wife was carrying your child, and it was determined that this child would be deformed, and they offer you that opportunity, now they encourage you to take it, what would you have said? Or if they did do it, what did you say to the doctors?
I protect life. My wife and I can't imagine our life without our son Isaac. He's just a special person, always happy, and without question, my wife and I are supportive of life. And in fact, we didn't have any tests prior, but I can share this with you that regardless, my wife was going to birth a beautiful boy, and what she did, big part of our family. We have 4 children, and Isaac is 1/4 of our family. And so without question, I mean, I will never waver in support of life.
You never know what precious things that life, or any life,
Yeah, for sure.
can bring into your knowledge and understanding, the perspectives, the compassion, all of those things. And since I have been pro-life all these years and worked with people in the pro-life issue, we had a family that they knew their daughter was going to die because there was just no hope of the child, and yet they carried it to term, and that is a special child in their life. She died shortly after birth, but there was no way that family was going to, under their control, say the life is done. It was in God's hands, and that child lived a few minutes to give them special meaning in their life.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's and I don't know if it's Iceland or Greenland. I'm not sure. But there was a report, and they said that they had, quote, eradicated Down syndrome, end quote, from their country. They eradicated it, and that was by prenatal testing. And it's so offensive for me to hear a statement like that. You've eradicated Down syndrome. I mean, how can you? Why would you even think of that? It's one of God's children, you know.
Because they're not thinking.
Yeah.
They're not thinking in the same. They don't have the same values, and that makes all the difference in the world. Is what do you base your values on? Truth or error?
Right.
And there certainly is a great deal of that out there today.
Yep.
Going back to Washington, yes, we know that there's a large indebtedness that we have to somehow succumb. I need some ideas for hope on that one.
Yeah, so we're trillions of dollars in debt, right? And even in the short time President Trump has been in office, we've reduced the debt by several $1 million, and some people will say, well, it's not enough. Well, you know what? Yes, it is. It's a start. we didn't get this way overnight, and we're not going to get out of it. And what we want to do is, I think that in general, I have never heard anybody tell me, you know, Pete, I don't want to pay taxes. No, they just want to pay their fair share and make sure that the taxes are invested wisely, and not on some, you know, this program or some pet project. They're invested wisely on behalf of all people. And you know, when I go to Washington, if I want a friend in Washington, I'm going to bring one of my 3 dogs. I'm not going to. I'm going to fight for this district and the people of Minnesota. I'm going to support our military. I'm going to ensure that our veterans get the benefits that they've earned and are entitled to. I want to make sure that Social Security stays solvent. You know, in 1935, when Social Security, the inception of it, there was 50 plus, 55 plus workers for every recipient. Now it's just under 3, you know, and so that's hard to comprehend. So back then it was 55 or 60 paying into it. Now it's just under 3 paying into Social Security. So how do we make sure that the people that have counted on it, the people that have put the monies towards it, that it remains solvent? And that's a critical piece of legislation that I want to make sure happens. It's a promises made, promises kept. The other thing is and I talked about the military, but we're also going to talk about the mining and manufacturing, the family farms, you know, the waters of the United States. If you're familiar with that, the waters in the United States, the EPA has extended their hand into like family farms. If they have a pond or standing water, they want that to be under federal legislation. And the Minnesota Farm Bureau says, no, we don't want that. And my opponent voted to support that type of legislation. That's not what our farmers wanted. That's not what our landowners wanted. That's not what our ranchers wanted. We have family farms. We have farms in the western part of the 8th Congressional District that are adamantly opposed to the WOTUS, it's Waters of the United States Act. And my opponent voted to support it 3 times. I am a law and order candidate. I believe in law and order. I spent 22 years in the city of Duluth protecting people's rights and making sure criminals were held accountable for their actions. My opponent voted against Kate's law, which would have made the continuous illegal immigrants that commit crimes not to be either placed in jail for periods of time. He wanted them to to be able to roam free, and I don't agree with that. And he also supports sanctuary cities, and so sanctuary cities are those cities that the leadership in those cities say, we're not going to let you know if there's an illegal alien or illegal immigrant committing crimes. The law enforcement would want to know. And so you have Catherine Stingley in San Francisco was shot dead by an illegal immigrant who was brought back to his home country like 4 or 5 times. And so how many times does this have to happen before we as a nation say, you know what, we are a nation of immigrants, we are a melting pot. There's a legal way to come into our country, and we welcome you. We welcome legal immigrants with open arms. We always have and always will, and I will support that. But being in the law and order person I am, come in legally, come into this country legally. Can you imagine if you had, like the sanctuary cities, can you imagine if you had pockets of people deciding which laws they weren't going to follow and which laws they wanted to follow?
It's happening right now.
Yeah,
That's what's going on.
Can you imagine the chaos that's going on? And so
yes.
I just think that we need to have good bipartisan talks on what do we want for our country. We have to secure our borders in a firm and fair way, and give a process, give it an opportunity for immigrants that want to come to our country legally. There's a process for it, and there's always been a process. And so I think that we have to really understand that it's time that we secure our borders, allow people to come in legally, because that's our law and order system. That's our way of life, and I think that this country has been more than welcoming to all sorts of people. We welcome people of all faiths. Come to our country and enjoy, but come legally.
Well, you can't have a society without law and order. you need to have rules, regulations that people must follow, and not some people follow them and others not. That is chaos, and we don't need to go there any further than we already are. We're having difficulty in certain parts of the United States right now with certain people for that reason. Well, Pete, it's been fun talking to you and getting your views on some of your beliefs. It's not the first time I've heard you speak, but I've learned a whole lot more about your views, and I really appreciate your coming in, and we'll just have to look forward to November and see what happens.
Yeah, so I appreciate you having me, allowing to have this conversation, and I'm looking forward to the campaign. There's 14 more months till November of 2018, and I've been all over the district. I've really enjoyed the people I've met. They're just salt of the earth people here.
My goodness, I was thinking it was this year's election. I'm glad you've gotten me straightened out on some things. So we've got a few more months, haven't we?
Yeah, 14 months.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks again for coming in. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thanks for viewing.